Hello, my name is Joy Jannotti. I'm here today for Knitters Day Out to talk about reversible cables. I'm going to show you in this video how to work cables that look good on both sides. So for example, here's one, and when you flip it over, there's the other side. And then I'll show you a second one, which is this one. And then there's the other side. The trick to working reversible cables is to use a reversible fabric. So in the two examples that I'll be showing you today, I'm going to be using ribbing. The first one, this one, is knit 2 purl 2 ribbing, and the second one, this one, is knit 1 purl 1 ribbing. Alright, let's get started. Here I have my first example of a reversibly cabled scarf. This is one side and this is the other side. And as you can see, they look identical. Well, this one's going up and this one's coming down, but if you turn them around, see, the back side is the same as the front side. And because they are the same, I don't really call them front and back or right and wrong side. I call them side A and side B. Or sometimes I call them side 1, side 2. Because they are exactly the same, while you're knitting them, sometimes you can get a little confused about which side you're working on. So I put a stitch marker on side A or side 1 to differentiate it from side 2. So this first example is a 2 by 2 rib. If I spread it out, you can see we've got knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2, all the way across the fabric. But because it's ribbing, it collapses together and gives you what appears to be a smooth, well, it's not smooth because of the cables, but it's a continuous stockinette fabric, even though it's actually ribbing, which you're probably familiar with from other ribbings that you have done. The thing to notice is that on the knit side, or the stockinette side, you can see the cable crossings. When you open it up and you look at the purl 2s, the purl side here, they're crossed on the back side, they're crossed as well, but you can't really see them. And that's just because of the nature of the knit side versus the purl side of the fabric. And that's what causes you to have a right or a wrong side when you're working cables. So in order to have the cables be reversible, you have to have some sort of reversible base pattern that you're working on. So in this case, it's knit 2, purl 2. Here, I have done a knit 2, purl 2 cast on in long tail. So for this example, for this scarf, I cast on 48 stitches in knit 2, purl 2 rib using a long tail cast on. My repeat is a 4-row repeat. So I did the cast on. And because a long tail cast on adds, it's like putting on your first row of knitting, so it counts as a row. So I did the cast on, which is row 1, and then 2, 3, 4, I did 3 more rows of ribbing to give me my first 4 rows. Then I did my first cable crossing. This is like I said, this is a 4-row repeat. So in this example, where I'm doing knit 2, purl 2 rib, and I'm crossing the cables on the 2 knit stitches. Row 1, so my first row of cabling, which I call row 1, is I do the 2 cables, purl 2, cable, purl 2, cable, purl 2, all the way across. Then when I get to the other side, row 2 is exactly like row 1. Cable 2, purl 2, cable 2, purl 2, cable 2, purl 2, cable 2, purl 2. Then when we turn and go back to side 1 again, the second 2 rows are plain rib. Knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2. So do that across, and then do it across a second time. So in this type of reversible cable, whatever you do on side 1, you then do on side 2. Most cabling patterns that you run into, the cabling is only done on one side of the fabric. But in this case, because we want it to be reversible, the cabling is done on both sides of the fabric. I used in this example worsted weight yarn on a size 7 needle, 48 stitches in knit 2, purl 2 rib. Now the 1x1 cable that I used, some people call it different names. Some people call it a C2B, as in cable to back, meaning the cable is worked over 2 stitches, and when you cross the cable, it's crossed to the back side, which means it's a right cross. When you're cabling and you go to the right, it's also to the back. And if you go to the left, it's to the front. So some people call this a C2B, cable to back. Some people call this a 1x1 cable because it's 1 stitch over 1 stitch. And then there's another name for it, which is not a cable at all. It's called an RT, or a right twist, which is actually a decrease paired with an increase. So it's a faux cable. So I'm going to show you, there's 3 different ways that you can work this simple cable. To start off, I have knit 2, purl 2, and I am cabling right on the edge. The classic way of working the cable is you slip the first stitch off and you're taking it to the back. Like I said, it's a cable back, or a right cable. So you slip the first stitch off and take it to the back. Then you knit the next stitch, and then you knit the stitch from the cable needle. Okay, that's the classic way of working a cable. I'll do it one more time, which you're probably already familiar with. Take the first stitch and put it on the cable needle and hold it to the back. Knit the next stitch. And then knit the stitch from the cable needle. And then purl 2. Now for a 1x1 cable, it's a little awkward to use a cable needle for just 1 stitch. So this is the easiest type of cable where you can do cabling without a cable needle. In this case, you're simply reordering the stitches and then knitting them. Since the first stitch goes to the back, you put your right needle through the second stitch, the front of the second stitch, which forces the first stitch to the back. And we're going to slip both of those stitches off, and then we're going to pick up the first stitch on the left hand needle, and you can see that these are now crossing. Slip the right stitch back over and then knit them. Purl 2, and I will show you that again. So this is the easiest way to do cabling without a cable needle on a 2-stitch cable like this. So because we're crossing to the right, we want the second stitch to be in the front and the first stitch to be in the back. So we're going to pick up that second stitch with the right needle in the front, leaving the first stitch in the back. We're going to slip both of those off the needle, pick up the right stitch onto the left needle. The stitches are now crossed. We'll put this one back on the left needle, and then we'll knit both of those. And purl 2. Now the third way you can work this is with the right twist, which is not actually a cable at all. It's simply paired decrease with an increase, and it looks exactly like the 1x1 cable. So in this case, you're going to start with a decrease where you knit the 2 stitches together. Before you drop those 2 stitches off the needle, you're going to knit a second time the first stitch. So go back into the first stitch and knit it a second time. So you have 2 new stitches on the right needle and 2 old stitches on the left needle, and then you drop the whole thing. Purl 2. And we'll do that one more time. So the right twist, you knit the 2 stitches together, and then you do a second stitch by working a second knit stitch into the first stitch on the needle. So now you have 2 new stitches on the right needle, 2 old stitches on the left needle, and you drop the old stitches and purl 2. So here you can see the first 2 we did with the cable needle, the second 2 we did without a cable needle, and then the last pair we did with the right twist. And all 3 methods are virtually identical. They give you the same result. Here you can see I have my stitch marker. I had it on row 1 of the 4-row repeat. Now that I have worked row 1 again, I will move this up to the new row 1, and that will help me keep track of what row I am, as well as what side of the fabric I'm working. Okay, here I've finished my row 1, side 1. So now I'm going to turn it over to the second side, and I'm ready for the cabling on the second side. So I'm going to repeat exactly what I did before. In this case, I have chosen to do the right twist as my cabling of choice. So I'll review it for you quickly here. I knit the 2 stitches that I'm going to cable together, knit 2 together, then knit the first one a second time, and then drop the whole thing off the needle. Purl 2. Once again, knit 2 together, knit the first one a second time, drop everything off, purl 2. And while I'm at it, I'll go over the without a cable needle one more time. I'm going to go into the second stitch from the front, drop the first stitch off, pick it back up with the left needle in the back, cross them over, pick up the first needle, the first stitch, and knit them to knit 1, knit 2, purl 2. And one more time for good measure. I will pick up the second stitch from the front, drop the first stitch off, pick it back up, pick up the second stitch, sorry, and then knit the 2. And purl 2. So there we have that cable. One other thing, I just wanted to show you how wide this is. Like I said, it's worsted weight yarn on a size 7 needle, and my scarf is currently 6 1/4 inches wide. This is a second example of reversible cables. In the first example, we had a 2x2 rib, and we were cabling a knit stitch over a knit stitch on both sides of the fabric. In this case, we have a 1x1 rib, and we're cabling knit and purl stitches over each other. So take a look at this. I'm not sure exactly what you see the first time that you look at it. However, what it is comprised of is simple rope cables that go up. So there's one that goes to the right, and every other one crosses to the right, and then every other one crosses to the left. It's an 8-row repeat, so the right cross is on row 1, and the left cross is on row 5. So every 4 rows, there's a cross. So row 1, row 5, row 1, row 5. And it looks like it's a regular cable going up a stockinette fabric. However, on that kind of a fabric, you would have a purl side on the back. But in this case, when we turn it over, it looks exactly the same on the back as it does on the front, except reversed. Here we're starting with a left and then a right, a left and a right. So it's the exact same thing, only in reverse. And the way that we achieve that, like I said, is with a knit 1, purl 1 rib. So I will show you how I'm working that. We go up here to the top. Once again, I have a marker showing me which is side 1, and it's also showing me which is row 1. Now in this case, since I'm cabling every 4th row, actually this is row 5 because my next cable is going to be on row 1. The right cross is on row 1 and the left cross is on row 5. So this is 5, 6, 7, 8. So now I know I have 4 rows. Now I'm ready for row 1, which is a right cross cable. And if you look closely, you might be able to see the knit 1, purl 1 rib. As we know, ribbing draws in, so the purl stitches recede and the knit stitches come forward. So when they're compressed, they just look like knit stitches. But when you pull them apart, you can see the purl stitches. Okay. So this is your basic cable, except it's done in rib instead of stockinette. So I have a knit, a purl, a knit, and a purl. So I'm slipping 4 stitches to the cable needle. On the surface it only looks like 2, but there's 4 because there are the purl stitches hiding behind there. So it's a right cross, or a right cable, or a back cable, cable 4 back, or some people would call it cable 8 back because it's an 8-stitch cable in total. Whatever you call it, we're putting 4 stitches on the cable needle, holding it to the back, and then we're going to knit 4 stitches from the left needle, knit, purl, knit, purl. Then we're going to work the stitches from the cable needle, knit, purl, knit, purl. Now the left cable is on row 5. So when I'm crossing the right cable, I'm just going to rib across the next 8 stitches. So 1, 2, sorry, my cable's getting in the way, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now I'm ready for my next cable. Now you could do these without a cable needle. I am not doing them without a cable needle for 2 reasons. One is it's an 8-stitch cable, 4 crossing 4, which is kind of awkward to do without a cable needle. And 2, because it's comprised of both knit and purl stitches, like I said before, the knit stitches pop forward and the purl stitches pop back. So when you release 4 stitches off the needle, that's what they're going to do. The knit stitches are going to pop forward, the purl stitches are going to pop back, and it makes it a little more tricky to do the cabling without a cable needle. However, I'm going to show you, if you wanted to work it, how you do it. So in this case, we're crossing to the right with the 4 stitches, the first 4 stitches going to the back. So I'm going to put my needle in the front of the next 4 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a little bit tight because there's so many stitches. And then we're going to pop these 4 off, and I'm going to try to hold them as close to the needle as possible so that it makes it easy to pick them back up again. So here they're coming off, boom, 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 and we pick them up, 1, 2, 3, 4. So now the first 4 are on the left needle and the second 4 are on the right needle. We're going to go ahead and pass these back to the left needle. So now my stitches are already crossed and I just work them as they are presented. So knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1. Whoops, lost that one. Oh boy, he does not want to go in there. Let's try that again. Okay, knit 1 and purl 1. All right. Now because this is a reversible fabric, well, because we're actually crossing the knit 1 purl 1 rib, it's doing the same thing on the back as what you're doing in the front, only in reverse. So it looks like it crossed to the right on the back, but it's the last cable, not the first cable. So in this case, you don't have to do your cabling on both sides of the fabric because the cabling on one side affects the cabling on the back. So for this example, I have used the same stitch count and yarn that I used for the previous one. I have 48 stitches of worsted weight yarn, but for the needle size, I've gone up 3 sizes. For the previous one, I used a size 7 needle. Oh, I guess it would be 2 sizes because this is a 9. For this, I'm using a size 9 needle. And the reason I'm going up so high in needle size is because this type of cabling, where you're cabling rib stitches, is very dense and makes a very thick and dense fabric. So I went up a couple of needle sizes to make it a more drapey and less dense fabric. And that is our second example of a reversible cable rib. I hope you learned a little bit of something here today with the reversible cables. And if you've enjoyed this and are interested in pursuing it more, I have some examples of some advanced reversible cables just to whet your appetite. This one here is slip stitch cables worked over a garter stitch background. So because it's in garter stitch, that's what makes it reversible. And then this one here is actually very similar to this scarf here. This is knit one, purl one, rib. This is also knit one, purl one, rib. However, it's done with two colors using double knitting. So just to give you a couple of ideas of things you can do to make reversible fabrics. Thank you for joining me today. Bye-bye.